For visitors to Wangi Park in northwestern Zimbabwe, a walking safari is often considered an experience of a lifetime. But for professional Zimbabwean guide 40-year-old Quinn Swales, it was his job, and he loved every second of it. He was originally from Trelawney in northern Zimbabwe and had worked as a pilot before turning his hand to wildlife guiding. All guides in Zimbabwean parks are trained to a very high standard, and Quinn was no exception. He knew Wangi Park like the back of his hand. It was his office, and what an office it was. Wangi Park is Zimbabwe's largest park, spanning 14,650 square kilometers. It is home to 4 of the Big Five: elephant, lion, leopard, and buffalo, and is home to Africa's largest population of wild dogs. It offers exceptional game viewing and photograph opportunities for paying guests. It is one of the best places to experience the wilds of Africa in all its glory. But the park had become famous for all the wrong reasons only the month before. Cecil the lion made headlines when he was illegally hunted by American dentist Walter Palmer. Cecil was a magnificent 13-year-old male who was considered the top attraction at Wangi. The incident sparked outrage across the globe as details emerged of the hunt in which Walter shot and injured Cecil with a bow and arrow, and then tracked the maimed lion for more than 40 hours before shooting him with his rifle. This act of cruelty was not unfelt by the rangers and guides who worked tirelessly to protect the animals in their park, whilst also providing paying guests with the best experiences to observe the wildlife safely. Quinn was in his job to enjoy the wildlife and allow his guests the same experience, not to kill it. At dawn, on Monday the 24th of August, 2014, Quinn took a group of guests staying at Camp Wangi out for a photographic walking safari. As the milky haze of the dawn light was just appearing on the horizon, the group eagerly walked through the bush. There was a chill in the air as night gave way to day, but it wasn't long before Quinn spotted some tracks in the soft, sandy soil. Along the edge of the open savanna were some telltale signs that Quinn's guests were in for a treat and likely an exceptional photographic opportunity. There were large paw prints, and Quinn identified them as lion footprints. He knew exactly which pride they belonged to as well. He had grown to know the lions over the years and knew them all individually, something the guests were always impressed with. Slowly, the group made their way along the edge of the brown grass, following the footprints until Quinn stopped. The guests all stood still in a line behind the guide. Pressing his forefinger to his lips, Quinn turned to the group and then pointed out the pride of lions. They were lying in the open at some distance away. The 6 clients Quinn was guiding marveled at the spectacle. They looked so peaceful and calm as they lay there, seemingly without a care in the world. They were perfectly illuminated by the early morning light, but something was about to change. The lions had spotted Quinn and his group, but they didn't seem to be too bothered by their presence. They were no threat to them at that distance. The group stood completely still in silence, some of them snapping away with their cameras. Then the male lion called Naksaha stood up. Clearly, he wasn't happy about them being there. He began to walk purposefully towards the group, and the guests began to feel their adrenaline pumping. They could see the male lion's huge, shaggy mane and the intent in his shiny bronze eyes. He wasn't running towards them, but his strides were confident and decisive. There was nowhere for the group to go. They were totally exposed on the African savanna, with no vehicle or camp to retreat to. And still, the lion kept coming. Although the clients' hearts thundered in their chests and they felt the urge to run away, Quinn had experienced this situation many times before. He didn't feel fear. He was an experienced and expert guide and knew exactly what to do. His priority was the safety of his guests. He spoke calmly and directly to them, briefing them on what to do. They listened intently, their eyes wide. He told them to get behind him and stand perfectly still. When the lion continued to walk towards them, it breached the safety distance Quinn felt comfortable with. When he had been in this situation before, the lions had usually stopped after a short distance and returned to the pride. But this time the threshold had been breached, and Quinn and the rest of the group began shouting loudly to deter the lion. This had the desired effect. The male lion stopped walking and stood still. He watched them, his eyes fixed on the group, his tail twitching. He was an impressive sight, but one which filled the group with fear, as they didn't know what he was going to do next. As he stood there, Quinn used the opportunity to set off a bear banger, which is a very loud fire bang. As the loud crack rang out, silencing the birds on the savannah, the lion jumped and immediately began to walk off obliquely from the group. It looked like he would return to the pride, and everyone breathed a sigh of relief. They never took their eyes off the lion, but it seemed that they were out of danger, and that this would be one of those stories they would laugh about later around the campfire. But this story was about to take a sinister turn. Suddenly, the lion turned and sprinted towards Quinn and his 6 guests. It took them all by surprise. Just when they thought the danger had gone, it was sprung on them once more. This was no mock charge, and Quinn didn't have any time to fire his rifle. He stood staring down the face of the lion as it ran straight at him. Almost 60% of a lion's weight is made up of muscle, more than any other mammal in the animal kingdom, with males weighing up to 225 kilograms, 496 pounds. They are power, rapid, and formidable. The lion covered the ground in seconds, its beige-brown body glistening in the morning sun, its huge mane bouncing on its shoulders as it charged forwards. Quinn didn't betray his guests and flee. He stood his ground, unable to fire a single shot. He stood in harm's way, taking the full brunt of the attack to protect his guests. At the last second, the lion leapt onto him, and he was thrown to the ground. He smacked his head on the dry soil and tried to fend off the enormous predator, but it pushed him down and immediately pressed its head forward. The sandy dust was kicked up amidst the commotion, and the lion bit down on Quinn's neck and shoulder. He was powerless to stop it. The full weight of the lion and the ferocity of its bite were overpowering, and Quinn could only grapple with it, trying to protect his face and neck. Blood poured from his open wounds, and the rest of the group could only shout at the lion to try and get it to stop. Seconds later, the lion jumped off Quinn and retreated to the rest of the pride. But in that brief yet powerful attack, the damage had been done. When the lion was far enough away, the others rushed to Quinn's side. They tried to perform emergency first aid, but the lion's long canines had severed Quinn's arteries, and he had bled out within seconds. He lay, limp and lifeless, on the ground, just yards from the animals he had spent so many years admiring and vowing to protect. Hurriedly, the group grabbed Quinn's handheld radio and radioed through to the camp. Rangers came to the rescue, and Quinn was carried away. The morning had so quickly turned into an unimaginable tragedy. The guests had been physically unharmed during the attack. They were lucky that the lion hadn't turned on them as well. It was a devastating loss of life. David Carson, the general manager of Camp Wangi, who was also a professional guide for more than 2 decades, praised Quinn's heroic actions. He said of Quinn, "He paid the ultimate price in pursuit of a job he loved in an area he knew so well." Quinn was an exceptional guide, and his passion and respect for the wildlife he worked amongst came across through his guiding. The last picture he posted on his Facebook page was of Cecil the lion, who was mercilessly hunted by Walter Palmer. Safari parks are a place of refuge from the hustle and bustle of modern life, where one can reconnect with nature and experience the wonder of the great outdoors. The safeguarding of national parks thrives only through the devoted efforts of park rangers, who are their caretakers. However, in their noble endeavors, these park rangers often find themselves amidst captivating encounters with diverse wildlife. But unfortunately, encounters with formidable creatures like bears sometimes pose unforeseen challenges. Kiyomi Sato was a park ranger at the Gunma Safari Park, located northwest of Tokyo in Japan. The park offers a safari zone where visitors can drive freely around the park or in designated buses to view and feed animals in their natural habitats. It houses over 100 species of different animals that roam freely in the extensive 360,000 square meter grounds. The enchanting oasis beckons visitors with promises of untamed beauty and the opportunity to witness wildlife in its purest form as it unfolds just beyond a single pane of window glass. However, on the ill-fated day of Tuesday, the 16th of August, 2016, the park would bear witness to a sequence of events that defied the harmony it was renowned for. It was a day like any other, with the radiant sun casting its golden hues upon the tranquil scenery and the gentle rustling of leaves embracing the air. Within the park's borders, 46-year-old Kiyomi Sato got into her vehicle and embarked on her routine patrol, unaware of the invisible threads of destiny that were about to be woven. The car was her trusted companion and her gateway to the uncharted territories within the realm of wild predators. With practiced grace, she navigated the winding roads of the park, her eyes keenly scanning each corner, every patch of lush greenery where curious creatures might lay in wait. The melodies of chirping birds and rustling leaves provided a soundtrack to her journey. A gentle breeze swept through the open windows, carrying with it the subtle sense of grass and adventure as the unmistakable silhouette of majestic giraffes emerged from the verdant landscape. The giraffes gracefully glided across the savanna with their elongated necks stretched towards the heavens, and their patterned hides blending harmoniously with the golden hues of the surrounding flora. Kiyomi eased her foot off the gas pedal, bringing the car to a gentle halt. With her hands resting on the steering wheel, she surrendered to the captivating scenery that was unfolding before her eyes. Time seemed to stand still as she embraced this precious moment of connection with the natural world. Unfortunately, it was amidst this beauty that disaster struck. An Asian black bear, which had been silently observing her parked car, launched its unsuspected assault. Driven by an unyielding hunger for life, the bear stood on its hind legs, reached out with its paws, and delicately grasped the safety bar on the passenger window of the car and began pulling. The bear's raw strength manifested in every tendon as it pulled the safety bar with purpose. The metal groaned under the force as the safety bar swiftly relinquished their grip and yielded to the bear's unwavering will. The safety bars, meant to ensure the safety of those inside the vehicle, had now been ripped off the frame of the car's window, exposing the park ranger to vulnerability. Kiyomi, who was stunned and frozen in fear, turned just as the bear had climbed into the passenger seat. Her senses were enveloped in a whirlwind of panic. Her heart pounded through her veins. Her eyes, wide with terror, desperately sought solace in the face of imminent peril. She found herself at the mercy of this unexpected intruder and had neither the time to get out of the vehicle and run as the hungry beast began its assault. Her fate was sealed. The safe haven of the vehicle, meant to shield her from harm, was now an arena of terror as the bear unleashed its aggression upon its human prey. In a blur of fur and fangs, Kiyomi found herself ensnared within the bear's grip. Pain seared through every fiber of her being as the bear's fangs tore through the flesh on her left breast and stomach. The world around her faded into a haze of fear, desperation, and confusion. The baffling sight drew gasps of astonishment and concern from nearby park visitors who were unaware of the horrors unfolding inside the confined space of the car. The car shook violently as the bear forcefully maneuvered its jaws, trying to tear the flesh from the bone. Fur and blood danced through the air, adding horror to the inconceivable sight. Swiftly recognizing the severity of the situation, fellow park staff rushed to Kiyomi's aid and shot the menacing beast before it could inflict further damage. They provided immediate medical attention while frantically summoning the necessary emergency services. Kiyomi's life now hung by a thread as she was urgently transported to the nearest hospital, where medical professionals tirelessly battled to save her. Unfortunately, the news that would send shockwaves throughout the park and the wider community soon arrived. A life had been extinguished prematurely, leaving an indelible void in the hearts of all who knew and loved Kiyomi Sato. In the wake of this devastating incident, authorities sought to decipher the sequence of events that led to this tragic encounter. It was discovered that Kiyomi had taken her routine patrol with the passenger's window rolled down. Typically, even though there are safety bars across the middle of each window, they should stay up unless the ranger is feeding the animals. The safety bars are designed to allow only the mouth of a bear to pass. However, this particular bear had successfully managed to tear out the safety bar, and with the window rolled down, the beast had seized its opportunity, laying claim to a life lost in the pursuit of duty. The authorities also questioned the strength of the 2-centimeter in diameter safety bars on the vehicle's windows, and why there was only one safety bar put in place instead of the recommended 2. But the park officials stated that the decision to use one bar was a point of compromise between safety and convenience. Eventually, 2 safety bars were installed on each window, since it was now clear that one was not enough for protection. Although the use of wire mesh as an additional safety feature was discussed, it was later discarded, as it would not allow the park workers to feed the animals through the window and would also make visibility poor. As the community mourned the loss of a cherished member, they also found solace in the shared memories and experiences that Kiyomi Sato had gifted them during her time at the park. Her unwavering dedication and her passion for the well-being of the animals she cared for will be remembered by everyone who knew and worked with her. A renewed commitment to education and awareness regarding wildlife conservation also took root, driven by the desire to honor Kiyomi's memory and prevent further loss of life. The Asian black bear was identified as a 5-year-old male, weighing a staggering 160 kilograms. Kiyomi's deadly encounter was the second animal attack in Gunma Safari Park since 1997, when a tiger killed a couple after they misguidedly exited their vehicle in the tiger enclosure. Now, with 2 human fatalities under the park's watch, visitors are always thinking if they will be the next to meet their terrifying final affliction. Château de Troyes is a zoo that is located just a few miles away from Paris, France. It's one of very few parks in Europe that doesn't just protect and reintroduce animals into their natural habitats, but they also offer a rather unique experience for visitors that Europeans don't usually get to have. For one, they can take rides across the park in buggies and jeeps, just like you would in African safaris. And they have very swanky chalets with huge viewing windows so that guests can see the bucks and gazelles roam around in the wilderness. The dangerous animals, however, can be viewed up close from transparent tunnels that allow viewers to see the lions, tigers, and leopards at eye level. Not all of the park is accessible to people. Predators like cheetahs and Komodo dragons have their own fenced-in enclosures, but a big chunk of the park has open forests that contain bears, wolves, and lynxes. That section of the park is called the American Exhibit, and it emulates the forests of Northern America, including the animals that would naturally reside there. Tour groups are taken there in armored jeeps at scheduled intervals. This is not the kind of zoo where you just walk around unattended. If you are not viewing the animals from the dome tunnels, then you are riding from one place to the other under the supervision of a guide. Even those renting chalets have guides patrolling the areas constantly. Troyes really has tried to think of every single thing they can do to keep people and animals safe. That is, as long as the people comply with the rules. Since there are still court proceedings tied to this incident, we will have to refer to the 37-year-old woman by a pseudonym, Marie. Her mother and her 2-year-old son arrived on Saturday morning in late June 2024. The day went exactly as planned. Marie's son liked the reptile house most of all, and they saw every enclosure that you could visit from the safety of the tunnels. They'd paid for one night in the chalets, but not for any of the safari-style tours in the jeeps. So it's possible that Marie wasn't aware that the park had a free-range area where animals were not kept in enclosures, which seems a bit odd, since they specifically requested that their chalet be inside the American Exhibit, as they were hoping to see a bear or some wolves from the safety of their chalet. Maybe Marie thought that the pathways were meant for people as well as the jeeps that used it. Whatever the case may be, Marie made a very strange decision the next morning. After getting a good night's sleep and even seeing a pure white Arctic wolf and 2 lynxes from their windows, they had scheduled for a jeep to escort them out of the park later that morning. But Marie decided that since she was in such a gorgeous slice of nature, she wasn't going to let the opportunity slip by to take a long jog among the trees. So, leaving her son with her mother, she set out in her running shorts, running all the way to where the pathway ended. The wide road narrowed to a thin path, obviously meant for people to go on foot. The rangers did occasionally use these dirt roads on foot, but it was only meant for the armed staff of the zoo, just like the dozen signs that Marie passed proclaimed. But Marie, probably distracted by the trees and keeping her breathing under control, didn't notice the warning signs at all. She just went into the tree line and kept jogging, her head still on where her feet were going. Marie nearly ran right into a fully grown bear. Marie came to a dead stop, her heart pounding in her chest. The animal was so surprised at the woman's sudden appearance that it stared at her with almost as much shock as Marie had staring at it. Slowly, without taking her eyes off the bear, Marie began to backtrack, praying that she didn't trip on a rock as she went backwards. But Marie didn't notice another animal behind her, a female Arctic wolf. It had been following her for several yards already. This wolf wasn't alone. Hidden in the trees behind her was her mate and her almost fully grown cub, too. All of them were waiting for a moment in which they could attack. Humans are not natural prey to them, and they weren't keen to just go charging at something so alien to them. But now that she had come to a standstill, all of their trepidation disappeared, and the lead female darted across the forest floor, coming in from behind Marie. Marie, whose eyes were still ahead of her, didn't see it coming until the female wolf latched onto her ankle. The animal tried to yank her feet out from under her, but Marie managed to stay on her feet as she screamed at the top of her lungs. She tried to kick the animal with her free foot, but it barely flinched when she struck it. The other 2 wolves came leaping from the tree line, and those white bolts of fur were enough to scare away the bear in front of Marie. It wanted nothing to do with this hunt, that's for sure. Marie caught the other 2 wolves coming at her and turned to shield her face just in time. The male landed on her back, and the younger one grabbed one of her arms. Marie's panicked screams reached the ears of 2 rangers who just happened to be at the trailhead doing their rounds. It took them seconds to reach the scene. By then, Marie, with 3 wolves on top of her, was at the bottom of the raging wolves, pinning her down on her stomach. The female had dislocated her ankle and had nearly ripped her foot completely off. The young one was pulling at her left arm, tearing the muscle and skin to shreds. But it was the male who had the most advantage. It had Marie by the throat. The position wasn't ideal to get to her main artery, but it knew instinctively that if it held on long enough, she would eventually suffocate or bleed out. The wolves shook their heads viciously, sending flecks of blood flying everywhere. Their stark white fur was already drenched in blood, and if Marie wasn't still screaming so loudly, you'd have thought she must be dead from all the blood she'd lost. The 2 men ran right at them, not even bothering to grab their radios to call for help. There was no time. They had mere seconds before Marie succumbed to the mauling of the 3 wolves on top of her. Swearing and shouting, they descended on the pack like they had no fear for themselves at all. And it's that overly dramatic display of confidence that got the wolves' attention. Just like they were curious about attacking Marie in the first place, so were they about taking on 2 fully grown humans. They tore their teeth out of the various places that they'd been latched onto and fled into the trees, leaving Marie in a bloody, moaning, and tattered heap. One ranger picked her up, cradling her like a child, and ran back to the jeep, while the other finally got the chance to radio in for help. By the time they arrived at the entrance, the ambulance was only 10 minutes away, and the staff, all trained in first aid, were able to keep her stable. Marie's eyes were rolled into the back of her head, and she was unresponsive, but still breathing when emergency services arrived. For the first 3 days in the hospital, her condition was such that the doctors weren't sure if she was going to make it. They'd managed to reattach the foot, and her arm had hundreds of stitches, but it was the throat that concerned them most. Marie had lost so much blood that she was in a coma for the first 2 days, and when she finally woke up, she was kept precariously still. If she so much as coughed, the stitches in her throat would rip loose, and she'd bleed out faster than they could get her into an operating room. It was a full week after the horrifying attack when complications happened after an infection in her reattached foot. Her body was rejecting the doctor's operations, and after a week and a half in a coma, Marie passed away. But if you thought the attack itself was dramatic, it's nothing compared to the drama that followed since then. Marie's family filed a lawsuit against the zoo. They say that there were no warning signs on the trail or the road at all, and that there was no clear indication that the public were not allowed to roam free. The park, on the other hand, has already proved that there were at least 7 signs on the route that Marie was jogging along. But her family's lawyers argued that the signs were too small, that the plain green script on them were not the proper color to draw a passerby's eyes to warn them of the danger. No warning symbols or bright red and yellow lettering that usually used to indicate danger was visible at all. This case has barely started, and it's already looking like it's going to be a drawn-out affair, with the zoo placing the blame on Marie and Marie's family placing the blame on the zoo. Who do you think is responsible for her terrifying final affliction?